Hi and welcome to Cycling Informed Cycling Tips. My name is David Heatley and today I'm going to be talking about helmets. Now I'll be covering off three things. I'll be covering off some of the legalese associated with wearing of helmets. I'll be talking about how to properly fit a helmet. And finally I'll be talking about what I personally look for when choosing to buy a helmet. But before we get started, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. We also have a weekly newsletter that goes out, so if you'd like to subscribe to that, the links are all below this article. Now back in the 1980s, there were no laws governing the wearing of cycling helmets. So my personal choice of headwear was the humble cycling cap. Now at the same time, things got pretty serious when we were cycle racing. We had to put one of these on. Now they're affectionately called a hairnet, and they really only provided very limited amount of protection. So enough about the history lesson. Let's fast forward to today. Now there are laws governing the wearing of cycling helmets based on the state and country that you're riding in. So here in Australia and New Zealand, you're legally required to wear a helmet while you're riding your bike at all times, and the helmet must comply with the Australian New Zealand helmet standard. Now this standard can be identified by a sticker located on the inside of your helmet. Now in recent times you can buy a helmet off the internet from overseas. Now the issue with that is that these helmets are not compliant with the Australian and New Zealand helmet standard. They're usually compliant with the helmet standard of the country of origin. Now the helmets usually look the same and people usually think that they're identical, but there are some subtle differences that make profound effects on the way that the helmet behaves. And usually a lot of it's got to do with the material that the helmet's made out of. Usually the helmets coming from overseas have a foam that is a different density to the ones they use against the Australian and New Zealand standard. Now the other issue is relating to insurance. If you're found to be wearing a helmet that's not Australian and New Zealand certified here in Australia and New Zealand, then there may be issues when it comes to an insurance claim if you have an accident. Now when it comes to racing here in Australia, both the Australian Veterans Cycling Council and Cycling Australia won't allow you to race unless you're wearing an Australian New Zealand standards helmet. So now I'm going to talk about the correct fitting of bicycle helmets. Now bicycle helmets come in various sizes for any particular model. So to figure out what size is good for you, there's usually a dead giveaway in that they have head measurements on the box or the helmet itself. Now all you need to do is measure the circumference of your head and then translate those measurements onto the measurements that are on the box and choose the right size helmet. Now there is a less fancier way of doing that, and all you need to do is put the helmet on and then just check to see whether your hands slip in underneath the helmet. Now if the helmet's too big, you'll find that you'll get quite a bit of movement backwards and forwards across your head, and you'll be able to slip your hands in between your head and your helmet. So the next step is adjusting the helmet to get it fitting correctly. You want to put the helmet on your head, and then there's usually a tension adjustment either at the back of the helmet or on the top of the helmet to adjust to tighten up the head strap and just have it so it's sitting firm on your head. Then you want to adjust the straps so that the buckles, or where the strap joins together, is around either your cheekbone or slightly lower from your cheekbone, and then adjust the strap itself so that there's a little bit of freedom underneath your chin, but not a lot. The idea is that you want to check that the helmet's firmly attached to your head, but not so tight that it's strangling yourself, and not so loose that it's going to fall off when you hit something. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal helmet choice. Now I've got three helmets. I've got this this Bell helmet that I bought in a bike shop in Adelaide. I've got this laser helmet that I recently bought in Adelaide. Every time I go over to the tour down under, I seem to buy helmets. And then I've got this gyro helmet that I bought from a local bike shop in Melbourne about 2 years ago. Now you'll notice the first thing about these helmets is that they're all white or silver. And I prefer white or silver helmets because it helps create more visibility or more colour contrast on the road. Generally, people driving in cars are on a road, the road's usually black or dark. And if you're wearing something that is contrasty against the background that you're riding against, then you're more likely to stand out. So a white or silver helmet is obviously more visible at night than a black helmet, and it's also more visible during the day. So that's one of the things that I look for in a helmet. Is I usually go for a predominantly white helmet. So I also like a helmet with quite a few vents in it. I have a tendency to get quite a hot head that's temperature hot, not angry hot. So I suffer from sweat dripping into my eyes, down my glasses, and causing me quite a bit of discomfort. So a couple of ways that I get around that is to have a helmet with a lot of vents in it, or alternatively, I just set up a cycling cap underneath my helmet, like that. Okay, and what that does is that as my head sweats, the sweat runs into the helmet and then drips off the peak of it. So that avoids the sweat running into my eyes and causing me that discomfort. Now when it gets a bit colder, I usually add the air warmers to my configuration. I'll put on one of these air warmer things, and that just keeps my ears nice and toasty, and then put the cap over the top of it. All right. And then I put the cycling helmet on top of that. And that'll keep my ears nice and warm on those colder days, and my head warm as well. Now when it gets really cold, I've got a special little beanie hat that I wear on the really cold days. And it's just a hat like this. It's made by Macpac, this particular one. And that acts kind of like the last configuration, but it's more thermal, so it's a little bit more warmer, and then I just put the helmet on top of it. And that's for those super cold days out there in the rain, or when it gets below sort of 2 or 3 degrees. That's the sort of configuration that I normally go for. One great thing about the gyro helmet is that it has this insert that comes with it that effectively does a very similar job as the cycling cap. It's an insert that inserts into the helmet and just acts as a bit of an insulation layer to keep your head warm on those colder days. And usually, you know, you can suffer from a bit of brain freeze when you're descending down a hill after a long climb in those colder days. So I find that during winter, that's the sort of configuration I'll have. I'll put that in, and that'll keep my head warm for those sort of mildly cold days. And then obviously I'll configure it up with the other configurations depending on the temperature. Now the other important thing about helmet design that I like to look at is the glasses placement. So I've got a pair of Oakley radars, and if you look at photographs of me riding, sometimes I ride with this sort of configuration here. So I'm looking for a helmet that I can fit the glasses into quite easily and then get access to them so that I can put them onto my head like that. So there's a lot of helmets that allow you to do that. This helmet's very good. But I noticed that the recent helmet that I've got, the Genesis helmet, that's a little bit different. It doesn't, the radars don't fit very well in them very well at all. But Jodie's got one of these helmets, and she just sets it up like that. So it's kind of a reverse look. So you can get quite creative with it. There are a few holes in the top of the helmet, but again, don't really feel like the glasses are going to really sit there. They feel a bit like they might bounce out. So I look for a helmet where I can at least get my glasses in there and that they're locked in fairly well. On really hot days, you know, the top of my head's prone to getting sunburnt. So by wearing a cap underneath the helmet on really hot days, the sweat that's coming off my head will go into the cap and help cool down my head. But it also prevents the top of my head from being sunburnt from the holes in the top of the helmet with the sun coming down into the helmet. So that's another reason for putting a cap on underneath your helmet. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you have a better understanding of the legalese associated with helmets, how to set up a helmet on your head, and the sort of configurations and what to look for when buying a helmet. Now, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about helmets, we do have some additional links at the bottom of this article that cover off some of the topics that we've talked about today.